Now, I know many of you have joined us because we're going over the topics about evaluating your financial aid offers, what to know about unusual or special circumstances, as well as accepting of a financial aid award. And we also have a knowledge check to just make sure that we always wrap around and ask you certain questions based upon the information as presented today. So let's get started with understanding your financial aid awards, or also known as financial aid offers. So many of you may be wondering what exactly is a financial aid offer because you hear these in different types of terms. Well, it's an aid offer that after you have been accepted for admission, you will receive a letter via email or snail mail. That's the hard copy version of your offer letter that you would read and you would sign and you would send on back. It will usually send this document detailing what you are eligible for. Now, understand this, that is coming from your financial aid offer at the college, university, and or career school that you have been accepted into for admission, or you're enrolling in the following class the following semester. Now, there are times that that college, university, and or career school will provide you an offer letter before you have had a chance to speak with someone at the registrar, talking about discussing your classes and so forth. So you always want to make sure that you're following up with each school, each university or career school that you plan to attend to ask them about the status of your offer letter. Also, to note about your offer letter, you may have only have a certain amount of time to accept any award that is offered to you. Sometimes that's written on the offer letter, and other times you should contact the financial aid office to determine what that deadline may be. Now, when you're thinking about your offer letter, you always have to take into account the cost of attendance of going to a school. Sometimes you hear this as the ticket price. Sometimes you hear this as the cost of going to the school. What the cost of attendance is going to consist of is your tuition and fees, your room and board. That's where you're going to lay your head, and the meal plan that you sign up for, whether that's going to be charged by weekly, monthly, semester, just depends on the college, university, and or career school. Now, you also have to take into account that the cost of your books. This is a little different. For those of you that have just graduated or you're getting ready to graduate, you may have to pay for books for certain classes. There may be materials such as laptops and so forth. You have to take these things into account because these are all going to make up your cost of attendance. And then you have your transportation expenses. How are you going to get to and from the institution? Institutions take this into account when averaging out these costs. How are you going to get around about while you're there? So think that in mind as well, in addition to your federal student loan fees. So when you're thinking about your cost of attendance, this is what you sort of want to start out with, that what is the cost of attending that institution? When you each institutions, that price may be different. That average may be different. In other words, the cost of attending a school may be different. So if you don't know where to start, you always good practice, contact the financial aid office. However, if you're more internet savvy, you might be able to check out their website, which will also list this information as well. Now, when we're talking about that financial aid offer, it may be broken down into four different types of buckets. Number one, grants. Two, scholarships, federal work study, and loans. Don't worry, we're going to go over these independently. So when you're looking at your offer letter and you see these terms, stay tuned because we're going to break this down even more. So for the first thing is grants. These are the things that you people consider free money, money that does not have to be paid back. Typically, this is based upon a student's financial need. They're demonstrating that they need certain level of funding that's determined by the formulas. This is where people are looking and say, okay, do I qualify for a grant or do I not qualify for a grant? Keep this in mind. Depending upon that grant, it may have specific eligibility and or application requirements, meaning just completing the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. If you haven't done so already, go to studentaid.gov in the upper right-hand corner in the icon. Click on that icon to get started today. Now, each grant may be different. It may have a different application process, eligibility. So you want to factor these things in mind. When you're thinking about whether it's a federal grant or an institutional grant, good practices, excuse me, is to understand who's providing the grant. So if it's coming from us, typically you will see that on your submission summary after you have completed the free application for federal student aid. If it's an institutional grant or external organization grant, then you want to contact that organization and or your college, career, or university. So keep that in mind. Who's providing the grant? What are their eligibility requirements in addition to their additional application requirements? And if they need additional documentation are things you need to keep track of. When you're thinking about scholarships, these can be offered by individuals, employers, private companies, nonprofits, professional and social organizations, and community and religious groups as well. When you think about scholarships, some is mostly based upon your merit or your skills. It could be specific to a particular groups of people, or it can be based on financial need. There are times that institutions operate on tiers where it'll be from 5,000 or to 15,000, just as an example. And those that represent the greater need will get closer to the 15,000. Those that demonstrate on the lower end will be closer to that 5,000. So some institutions, organizations can use it directly for that as well. Now, there is federal work study available that may be available to students as well. If you already completed the FAFSA already, you noticed that there is no checkbox if you're familiar with completing the FAFSA form. That block that was removed from the 2024-25 FAFSA form. Now, federal work study is where students can gain valuable work experience while earning money to help them pay for school expenses. Now, the student is required to contact the school, whoever's responsible for the program or providing the opportunities, the work opportunities for students. They want to make sure that they're contacting them to determine what the next steps in their application process may be. It may come with an interview, but these are ways to sharpen their skills. So therefore, when you're ready to go into the workforce or the work area, you'll be better prepared, but also it enables you to earn some money while you're in school as well. Now, when it comes down to work study, a few factors to consider. Number one, it may be only a limited amount of jobs. So it could be first come, first serve. It could be where the individuals only have 1 or 2 jobs available open for federal work study students who have that designation. So you want to make sure you're always in communication with your school to determine where you need to go to apply for these jobs, to look up the available jobs, and to learn more about those particular positions. Now, when it comes down to being on a financial need, all of these elements have to fit within your cost of attendance. Some of the questions that we do receive from time to time are individuals wondering how much financial aid do I need for the entire year? Well, it just depends on the institution because you can't exceed their cost of attendance. So let's say school A's cost of attendance is $10,000. For that individual year, students can't exceed more than $10,000 for that time. So same thing goes because the federal work study is considered part of the financial aid offer, and it would also can exceed that 10,000 or whatever remaining in their need. So keep that in mind as well. Now, lastly, we come to federal student loans. Now, the school is going to determine what your financial need is because they're going to do that by subtracting the cost of it from the cost of attendance. So, in the layman's terms, it's going to be, let's say, that same example of $10,000 of the cost of attendance. Let's say your SAI, and we'll get into what that means a little bit later, is $5,000. That means the student is demonstrating $5,000 in financial need. But because each institution is responsible for developing their cost of attendance, that may vary per institution. Now, let me pause right there for a second. When we say institution, we're saying college, university, and or career school. So you might hear me use those words interchangeably throughout this webinar. Those are what we mean by institution or post-secondary institution. Now, there are also limits to what you can borrow for your federal student loans. If you're a junior, a senior, also if you're a freshman or a sophomore. It does take into account how much you have already taken out in terms of you'll be borrowing, your total amount of borrowing, but it also takes into account the grants and scholarship that you are receiving as well. You should only borrow what you need. Now, these funds can be used for educational expenses, and that could be for traveling back and forth to your institution, books, supplies, to pay for your meal plan, and other things as well. If you're wondering exactly what the total list looks like, please take some time and check the information out on our studentaid.gov, where we have abundance of information and resources dedicated to explaining what those educational expenses are. Now, when it comes down to the federal student loans, it is broken down into three different buckets. It's going to be the direct subsidized, direct unsubsidized, and the direct plus. So starting out with the direct subsidized, these are just for undergraduate students who are demonstrating that financial need. Now, you might want to put an asterisk next to it or a check mark because you might be tested on that same question. Now, understanding what you need to borrow and when you need to borrow, when you fill out the free application for federal student aid, the next step is to contact the financial aid office and to ask them what are the next steps in terms of making sure that you are finalizing that amount, or you need to go through additional steps. And we'll touch on some steps that all students need to do. But you should be in direct contact with that financial aid office at that institution. Now, when we're talking about subsidized, this is a loan that the federal government, the United States Department of Education, is paying the interest while you're enrolled in school, which means that if you borrow $3,500 up to 6 months and that you stop going, it will still be $3,500 that you would owe, because the government is paying the interest while you're in school. Now, unsubsidized is where the federal government is not paying the interest. Now, that is going to build. That is also known as accruing. Whenever you hear those words, interest accrues, that means interest is building. So on an unsubsidized loan, the interest is building once the loan has been dispersed into the school's account on your behalf. Now, you are responsible you, the student, are responsible for paying back the subsidized and unsubsidized loan, because these are going to be borrowed under your name. So you want to keep that in mind as well. Now, with the unsubsidized, and the main difference between the unsubsidized and subsidized is that the unsubsidized is also available for graduate students, whereas the subsidized is only available for undergraduate students. You might be tested on that in a moment. So when you're thinking about which loan you should borrow, you should always speak to a professional or a college access or higher education professional about your particular options. And also on the lower right-hand corner side, you'll also find more information over at our link below, or you can go to studentaid.gov. Now, when it comes down to plus loans, it can be broken if you're a graduate student or if you are a parent. Parents, if you are considering a plus loan, you will be borrowing these funds on the behalf of the students. The funds will be sent directly to the school, and the school will be responsible for the dissemination of that loan into the student's account and following steps after that. You are responsible for paying that back, not the student. So that's the main difference when you hear plus loans or you hear parent plus loan, of who is responsible for that. As a grad student, if you're eligible to borrow a grad plus loan, you will be responsible for paying those back as well. Now, whenever you're thinking about how much you can borrow, the same thing goes with all of the financial aid offers. As it pertains to students, you can't borrow more than what is considered for that cost of attendance at that college, university, and or career school. Now, if you have a adverse credit history, you may be able to receive a plus loan if you meet additional requirements. So please feel free to follow the link on your screen or go to studentaid.gov to learn more about eligibility for the plus loans. Now, there are benefits between federal loans against private student loans. Now, first and foremost, if you're thinking about a loan, again, we want to reiterate, you only should be borrowing what you need. Now, the benefits to having a federal loan is that after you graduate or you stop going to school or you change your enrollment status to less than half time, then that's when the payments are going to become due. Whereas in the private sector, for private loans, many of which the loans will become due within 30 days after the loan has been dispersed into the student's account. So, and you may be still in school, you may took some time off, about a couple months off, 2 or 3 months off, you still be responsible for paying back that student loan. But again, those terms and conditions are set forth by the by the organization that's providing that loan, that private student loan. So you want to make sure you're double checking with them. When it comes to subsidized loan, we're covering the interest while you're in school. On a private sector, for the most part, you will be responsible for that interest. When it comes down to repayment plan, our federal income repayment plans are available for federal student loans. They're not available for private loans. Those are a separate entity, and you have to check with them as to the available repayment plans. But there are no access if you are borrowing private student loans for the repayment plans, or to have that consolidated into your federal financial aid or federal repayment plans as well. So keep that in mind. When it comes down to loan forgiveness, our loan forgiveness programs are for federal student loan borrowers and not for private student loan borrowers. Now, the private student loan borrowing companies may have, or lending companies may have a loan forgiveness program, a loan repayment program, but you should contact them if you have a private student loan. So keep that in mind as it relates to the federal loans, federal student loans versus your private student loans. Now, many students say, okay, that was a lot, and I kind of understand exactly what you were referring to, Mr. Ellis, but I have additional questions. I fill out my FAFSA. I already applied for that institution. When can I expect my offer letter? Well, it just varies. You should be in contact with the financial aid office at the schools that you are interested in attending, and they will let you know exactly when you can expect to receive your financial aid offer and how you can expect to receive it, whether it's going to be by email or postal mail, also known as snail mail. So you want to make sure that you are communicating with them, you're talking with them about the available, when is that going to be made available to you? So therefore, you're making a good decision, an informed decision in a good amount of time. Now, typically the process goes, once you fill out the FAFSA form, that information is sent to the schools that you have indicated on the FAFSA form, and then they will begin their individual process. So it's always important that when you're looking at the list of schools, or colleges, universities, and career schools to receive the information, that you're putting up to 20. That is a good change that did occur for the 24-25 FAFSA form, is that it did increase from past years of 10 to up to 20. Now, if you do want to add more than 20, you would have to wait until the FAFSA has been processed and to go back in and to remove those 20 and to add an additional 20 for those institutions to begin receiving the information that you provided on the FAFSA form. So let's say, for example, you have done all of that, and now you're just waiting to hear back from the institution. And then you look in the mail, or you check your email, and finally you receive it. But you receive a number of them, and you want to know how or what you know about comparing these options. And this is going to be very important. So tune in. If you're traveling, roll up the windows and listen very carefully. And if you're at home, really relax, great job. But even listen even closer. First things first, understanding what we mean by net price. When we talk about net price, we're talking about what will it cost you. So in the past, it was a myth where individuals believed that it was the EFC was their net price, or now it was called the Student Aid Index was their net price. That's not the case. Those are just index numbers used to determine how much aid you're eligible for. Okay, it is not the net price of going to the school. A net price in this term will be what the student and or their families are responsible for paying. In many cases, there are calculators on the website at a college, university, and or career school that will give you an estimate. It's only going to be an estimate until the student has enrolled in classes. Now, in order to find this information, there is a formula for doing so. For example, if you're looking at the different cost of attendance to going to the schools, the first thing you want to set out and establish is, what is the cost of attending that school? What is their cost of attendance? You make that determination by visiting their website. You can call it to the financial aid office and ask, or you can ask a higher education professional as it would pertains to that institution. What is their cost of attendance? You take that, and then you apply all of the aid that you're eligible for. A good practice is to focus on grants and scholarships before you focus on what's available via federal student loans. Now, when you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, my cost of attendance of going to the school is $9,500. I have been offered $4,400. That means we're going to be responsible for $5,100. That is aid that you have to ask yourself, okay, what other aid is out there? What other private scholarships or external scholarships may be available? External grants may be available. And if you're eligible to borrow federal student loans, then you want to know, okay, how much do I need to borrow? How much can I borrow? And then at that point, you would apply that number. If that number is still smaller than that $5,100 and you cannot find any additional aid, then that remaining will be what is expected for you to come out of pocket. There are other opportunities at the college, university, or career school. You might want to talk to them about payment plans and how do they go about instituting that, and other options as well. But those conversations will be had with that college, university, and or career school. Now, when you're thinking about these options too, we do have a college scorecard. If you go to that website at the bottom of your screen, collegescorecard.ed.gov, that is a tool that you can start comparing institutions, and you can compare by a number of things. You can look at what is the default rate for that college, university, and or career school. You can look at the number of students and their average income in your program. You can compare large schools versus mid-sized schools versus smaller schools to break down the best choice for you. We want to emphasize you're making a decision for you, the student. And if you're joining us as parents, the more information that you have, the better informed that you will be. Now, as you're comparing these different schools, and we're hoping that you're taking time to check out our college scorecard.ed.gov, and you're utilizing it to compare the schools that you have received offer letters from. But let's say you have evaluated the schools. You've evaluated them on their size, the location, on the data that we provided to you. And now you're ready to accept the financial aid offer. Well, keep in mind three things. Number one, you don't have to accept everything. So even if you receive abundance of options, you can only have to accept what only you're willing to accept. You should always consider all of your options. So you never should just take that letter and just say, make a decision based upon that and move on. Take a moment and listen and review all of your options, because all of this is going to be valuable for making an informed decision. And lastly, always prioritize funds you don't have to pay back, like your grants and your scholarships. Always prioritize those. The federal student loans are available for those that are eligible if you need them, but you only want to borrow what you need and when you need. Now, some things that may come into your mindset. Hey, what should I know about choosing which ones to choose? Well, we have a formula for that. Number one, money you don't have to pay back are always the first things that you should accept. The second is going to be any earned money. When you hear earned money, you should always correlate it or think of federal work study. Those are funds that you will earn and will be paid out of from a pool of funding that's been set aside as part of your financial aid offer. Lastly, you want to consider borrow money. So you heard on the previous slide me discuss, hey, look at your options as it pertains to your grants and scholarships. Think about those first, and it goes along here as well. Now that when you're thinking about earned money, again, you still have to apply for those jobs. You may be asked to do an interview, write a resume. There are resources on your college campus. So you want to make sure you check those out as well. But please take advantage of that, because that may be a good option for you, the student. And as you're joining us again, as parents, it may be a good option for your student. Now, there are additional things that you may need to know about having a grant or a scholarship. Number one, that there may be specific conditions placed upon that grant and or scholarship. Now, and the biggest thing is to understand, for example, is our Teach Grant. It does have a service obligation attached to the Teach Grant itself. So if you don't complete your service obligation for the Teach Grant, it will be converted into a loan, and you must repay that with interest. Now regarding scholarships, You may be asked to maintain a certain grade point average, participate in a certain athletic sport, or additional things. You want to make sure that you're reading all of the terms and conditions as it pertains to that scholarship that you are expected to receive. You also want to check too, exactly, is it just for 1 year? Is it for 2 years? Is it for 4 years? Is it for 8 years? So how long do you expect to receive this particular scholarship is something you need to remember and understand as well. Now, lastly, you may be asked to maintain the scholarship. So it's not just about receiving it. It's not just about being eligible for it. You may be asked to maintain it. And by maintaining it, you need to hold a certain grade point average or what's called satisfactory academic progress. You might see SAP or SAP. That's exactly what that means. Each organization, including the post-secondary institution, may have certain requirements as it pertains to maintaining your scholarship. So it's always important that if you are offered a scholarship, that you're asking those questions about how long is the scholarship for, what are the criteria onto me obtaining it, and what is the criteria onto me maintaining it. And these are questions that you should ask as it pertains to the grants and the scholarships that you're expected to receive. Because if you ask to apply the following year again, then you want to know exactly what the application process is. Does it require you to complete the FAFSA form and that's it? Or do you still have to complete a FAFSA form and or an additional application? So you should be contacting, these are questions you should be asking the financial aid office at the college, university, and or career school. Now, when you're thinking about that earned money or that federal student or the federal work study, keep in mind this is that you can work part-time or you can work up to a set number of hours. Those jobs aren't guaranteed and they do have a funding limit attached to them. So you want to ask these questions for the individuals or the organization or the department that's responsible for administering the program at that college, university, and or career school. Now, as you're matriculating or as you're going through your education, again, you're going to see that SAP, that satisfactory academic progress, because you have to maintain it even for federal student aid. So understanding what is the SAP guidelines at your college, university, and or career school would help you be more informed and better prepared when things come up. Because from our experience, things do come up, but being more informed, you know how to navigate through those situations. As it pertains to our federal student loans, keep in mind that if you only want to take less than what you offered, that's within your right. And again, as we said before, you don't have to accept everything. You could accept a lesser amount. You just have to inform them at that post-secondary institution or your college. Now, if you don't accept the full amount, that's perfectly fine. You'll still be eligible to borrow that at a later time during that year, pending that is still within your cost of attendance. So, but you should be having these conversations about how to accept these loans, what should you be doing, what else do you need to be doing in terms of accepting these loans with the financial aid office at the college, university, and or career school. Now, when it comes to accepting those awards, again, schools may have a deadline. So you want to make sure that you're submitting your response back to that college, university, or career school as soon as possible, or as soon as you feel comfortable in doing so, but before the deadline that they set. Now, if it's online, sometimes you can go click a couple buttons, and then that's it. Or they may require you to provide a wet signature, which is basically you taking a pen and paper, putting your signature on, and you're sending that out back to that college. Now, that in some cases will be enough. In other cases, they will require you additional steps, but you just want to make sure you're talking to the financial aid office. Now, when it comes to accepting a grant or loan, again, they may have additional steps, but when it comes to your final acceptance, you always want to make sure that you're doing so with the financial aid office as well, so they can finalize your award and you can move on to enrolling at that college, career school, or university. When it comes to your loan, your federal student loans, you will be required to complete what's called entrance counseling. Typically, it takes about 30 minutes, and you can complete it at studentaid.gov/entrance-counseling. That link is always also on the lower right-hand side of your screen, or if the screen is flipped, lower left-hand side, or you can go ahead and click on that link if you request the PDF version. to copy and paste it, or you can visit studentaid.gov. Now, the biggest benefits of going through entrance counseling is that it's going to help you understand those terms and conditions, to help you understand what you are borrowing, what does it mean to borrow, and what does it mean to repay. It's going to teach you what a loan is, how interest works. Remember, we covered two terms on the outset of this webinar. We were talking about accruing, building. We were talking about borrowing. That's what we're borrowing, and we're having to pay that back. And then we were breaking down interest. This is money that's on top of the principal amount. That's where you have your base amount. Remember, we talked about that 3,500, and then we added, okay, if it's interest, it's going to start adding funding or adding amounts on top of that. So you owe that principal 3,500 plus whatever that extra is. That extra is your interest. That'll be broken down in your entrance counseling and helping you understand these terms and understanding what exactly you need to do. Now, before you begin that entrance counseling, you always want to make sure that you're communicating with the financial aid office and asking them what are their specific requirements. So it's always important that you are in communication. So if anything that you take away from this webinar, the number one thing that you should always hear is active communication with your financial aid office. Now, you'll also be asked to sign or provide what's called a master promissory note. This is a legal document saying you are borrowing these funds. Whatever that amount that you are electing to borrow, this is what's going to say. This is also going to serve as your promise to repay that amount. Now, you can sign one master promissory note, or also known as an MPN. You might want to write that down. Those are the acronyms that you might see. MPN, that's also your master promissory note. Now, that can cover up multiple loans. So you may sign one master promissory note that will cover multiple loans that are under that particular program. It'll also explain to you a time frame that they're expecting to either have it dispersed, or as well the time frame of the total repayment. So it can be 30 years or 360 months. Just depends upon that particular loan program. So keep in mind those terms of entrance counseling and or the master promissory note. Now, we covered a number of things as it relates to the financial aid offer. Now, many of you may complete that FAFSA, and you may have an unusual or special circumstances. Now, you should know what these two terms mean. So let's start out with understanding what is our special financial circumstances. When you think about special financial circumstances, think about it like your financial circumstance. This is based upon your finance. If you're experiencing anything that's related to your financial circumstance that has changed outside of what's required to report, you want to make sure you're contacting the school. So an example would be for the 2024-25 FAFSA, we look at your income or your income taxes from 2022, but your situation may have changed in 2023. You may have experienced or currently experiencing a pay cut or reduction of income, or any type of high tuition at an elementary or secondary school, or high amounts of medical or dental expenses that were not covered under insurance. At that point, you should contact the school. Contact the financial aid office at the school, let them know about your situation, and they will let you know what documentation you can supply or provide that would help you navigate that. So understanding what the special circumstances are, and if you're experiencing that and who to contact, will help put you in better position to have the financial information that you already provided looked at again, adjusted potentially, and then reflected upon with a new amount. Now, that is different from unusual. Unusual is your living situation. What's occurring? So when a student typically hits yes to this, we ask additional questions. For example, is this going to prevent you from or asking your parents going to prevent you from accessing higher education? We also ask, do the unusual circumstances prevent you from contacting your parents, or would contacting your parents provide a risk? Okay. Now, it is in a case where a student can be considered a provisionally independent student, and they will be able to complete their FAFSA form without their parent. But if they are considered a provisionally independent student, that's letting them know that they may be asked to provide documentation, and they want to make sure they're contacting the financial aid office at that college, university, and or career school. Now, when you're going through this process, and if you are experiencing any one of these 5 bullets on the screen, your parents are incarcerated, you left home due to an abusive family environment, you were the victim of human trafficking, you were granted refugee or asylum status, or you were abandoned or estranged from your parents and have not been adopted, you still want to complete the FAFSA. Don't stop. Complete the FAFSA form and then call the school. Because when you call the school at that point, then they can start the process of professional judgment. Now, professional judgment enables the school's ability to make adjustment on the FAFSA form depending upon the student's circumstance. And it's always important that a student is in communication, because a school may ask them for an interview, they may ask for written documentation from an entity or individual, or so forth. So each school may have a different request based upon that student's circumstance. So a student can be going through one situation, but multiple schools may ask for various types of documentation. So you want to make sure that you're contacting, you, the student, or the parent, are contacting the financial aid office at that college, university, and or career school. Now, those determinations are going to be made by that financial aid office, and is not going to be made by United States Department of Education. So it's important that you don't contact us pertaining to your unusual or special circumstance, that you're contacting the financial aid office at the college, career, or university. Now, I know I just walked through 2 types of circumstances. So let's break those down for a second. And on your screen, you're going to see in the blue what's considered the special financial circumstance. In the white, you're going to consider what's the unusual circumstance. Again, special circumstances, you might see that those words. You also might see special financial circumstance. That's all financial related. Unusual is lifestyle related. So just keep those in mind. Now, if you don't fit within these 2 buckets, you still want to call the financial aid office and talk to them about your circumstance, and they will know which way to navigate based upon the information that you provide. Now, what's not considered the unusual circumstance is where you have parents who are in the students' lives and they're just refusing to provide information. They're just not willing to provide information at all, and they could, but they're just refusing to do so. That's not considered an unusual circumstance. If a parent is electing not to provide or not to claim the student on their income tax return, that's not considered an unusual circumstance. If a student is demonstrating that they're self-sufficient, but they're still in contact with their parent and contacting them won't pose a risk, that's not considered an unusual circumstance, unless there are additional things that may come into play. If they are, therefore, the student and or the parent should be contacting the school at the college, university, or career school. Now, you heard me talk a lot about documentation, interviews. What does that possibly mean? Now, a couple of examples are listed on your screen as well. So it could be from a documented interview, statements. It could be from court or legal documents or any other supplementary information as it pertains to the special circumstances or your special financial circumstances. As it pertains to unusual circumstances, it could be, again, interview, court orders, documentation, documented phone calls, and things like that. So these are just examples of the types of documentation that a student may be asked. So it's always good practice, again, that you have this active communication and that you're with the financial aid office, and that you're asking them, hey, this is my situation. What do I need to do in order to verify my situation and then finalize my financial aid offer? So whenever they're looking at that information, and they would mean by the financial aid office, a couple things that you need to know is that once they make that determination, that is more so considered final determination, they'll, if need be, they'll recalculate the aid offer. If funds are still available, that they'll go ahead and award students based upon their eligibility. Keep this in mind, that you really want to start this process on the front end, because funds are limited. Your information can change, but if funds are not available, schools will not be able to award students additional aid. So the early on that you can convey this information to the financial aid office, the better off you'll be. However, with that said, just because you are not experiencing it at this time doesn't mean you may not experience it in the future. So if you do experience it in the future, just know that you should be contacting the financial aid office based upon the information that you have available for you as well. So I know we talked about a lot. And so as I stated on the earlier slides, we are going to check your knowledge. So we're going to start out with question number 1. What type of loan is available only to undergraduate students who have financial need? Now, remember what I said about the earlier slides. There are 3 things that we're going to flag. Number 1, we're talking about a loan. Number 2, we're talking about undergraduate students. Number 3, we're talking about financial need. So if you answered B, you are correct, because it's the direct subsidized loans that are available that only to undergraduate students who are demonstrating the financial need. So unsubsidized can be utilized for both undergraduates and graduates. Plus loans can be utilized for graduate students and or parents. So keep that in mind as well. Now, when it comes down to question number 2, I'm going to test it again. Is this statement true or false? You can decide which parts of your financial aid package you want to accept. I'll wait a moment. Is it true? Is it false? Is it false? Is it true? It's true. You can reject any portion of your aid package. Keep in mind, just because you receive an offer doesn't mean that you're obligated for that entire offer, that you have to accept that entire offer. You can reject any portion, and you can reject any portion or all of it. It's entirely up to you after you make an informed decision. Question number 3. If you are a dependent student whose parents recently lost a job, your family may A, have an unusual circumstance. B, your family may have professional judgment. C, your family may have a dependency status. Or D, special financial circumstance. So I'll give you a moment to read over the question. Which one could it be? Could it be A, B, C, or D? That means D. They have a special circumstance. So because this is financial, they have a special circumstance. So what they're going to be asked to do is submit their FAFSA form. And then after submitting their FAFSA form, then the information will be processed by the institution. After it's processed by the institution, you should follow up with the institution to determine whether the next steps in terms of documentation that they require to help verify your information. Now, we have a number of tools and resources available that for you all. And if you just joined us or you're joining us via our YouTube channel, please check out our resources, our tools and resources on our social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. You can also check this webinar out on our YouTube at FSA Outreach. We will provide a recording within 24 hours. So please like us, subscribe to us, follow us, and share this webinar with those students, particularly as they're trying to make a decision on what is the best college fit for them. Now we're going to navigate toward the question and answers portion of this session that you all have submitted questions into. And we're going to start off with, and you might hear another voice in the background. That will be my colleague, Fred Stennis, joining us.
Thank you, Isaiah. What a great job and great presentation. I want to thank you for that powerful, important information. We don't have a lot of questions that have come in the chat, but we do have a few. Let me start off with this first one. This participant wants to know, do students have to report the financial aid they receive on their tax income, their income tax report? Good question.
Sure, that's an excellent question. So you would have to report the financial aid that you receive if you're using it for living expenses. And let's say, for example, if you receive a scholarship that's to be used as income, then you have to report that on your income tax. But you always want to make sure that you're talking to a tax accountant or a tax preparer about which scholarships or grants or which type of financial aid is eligible to report on your income tax report forms.
Very good, very good, very good. And we have one more. I think it's a very interesting question. We don't get this a lot, but it's a very important question. It reads, if a student gets their offer letter, is it for the entire academic school year or just for the next semester? That's a
Awesome
very
question.
Yeah,
Yes,
very
that is a
awesome
great
question.
question. Absolutely. So when it comes to the offer letter, those are typically for the full academic year, unless you're joining the school in later, like say, for example, if they're with a trimester, you're joining in that second semester, or if you're dealing with a semester, you're joining in the second half or just the first half. Those will be adjusted and it'll be reflective of whatever you're joining or enrolling at. But it's the full expectation at the beginning of the year. So if you're going to re-enroll in the fall and you plan to proceed through school for the fall and the summer and the winter, excuse me, the fall, winter, spring, then you want to make sure that your financial aid offer reflects that. If you're just joining it for the fall and the spring, then typically financial aid departments are just going to give you an offer letter for the fall and for the spring. But again, if you're planning to attend college, whether you're going abroad in those winter or summer breaks, you want to make sure that you're going to talk to the financial aid office to have your offer letter reflective of that, because the funding is typically just for that full academic year with those main semesters or trimesters.
Very good answer. Very good question, because that's a question we often assume people knows the answer to, and I'm glad you answered it that way. Again, we don't have any more questions that have come in. I think we have acknowledgement. Someone's recognizing the work that's been done in federal student aid as relates to our loan program. But we really want to encourage you all to continue to spread the word to those students who may or may not have completed or submitted their FAFSA form, to go ahead and do so now, so we can make sure they get the processing or the aid package or the offer letter that Isaiah spoke about this evening. With that said, Isaiah, I think that's going to wrap up our questions now. We have one more quick question. Someone
Sure.
having some challenges as it relates to the SAI. Any recommendations you can offer as it relates to them turning in their form but not receiving the SAI? So any recommendations on what they might be able to do or next steps that might help them?
Sure. So first you have to understand when you submit it and how you submitted it. Number one, if you're submitting a paper FAFSA form, it's going to take about 7 days. So understanding that there's a turnaround time to that when it comes to SAI. And we will begin processing all the paper FAFSAs next month. So keep this in mind as it relates to the paper FAFSAs and when that's being processed and when you can expect to receive your SAI. If you filled it out electronically, then you can expect to receive that in 1 to 3 days, pending no other issues. If you're having other issues that need to get resolved, those typically have to get resolved first before an SAI will be generated. So you always understanding where you are and what challenges you need to overcome or how long you need to wait for. Those are things you have to take into account of why you may not have received an SAI. If you have successfully submitted an online application and you have done everything's been processed, it's just a glitch in the system, just give us a call to our FISAC, to our financial aid call center, and we'll make sure we look into it a little bit further.
And what's that number, Isaiah? You know? That 1-800?
It's the 1-800. Let me see if we can go back a slide.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Don't have a slide for it, but check us out on studentaid.gov on the bottom, on our footer, which is at the bottom of the screen, and we'll have a number directly. It should be 1-800-4FED-AID.
Yeah, 1-800, the number 4, FED-AID, 1-800-4FED-AID. Very good, very, 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 very good. And then lastly, any conversation or reference to the SAI ranges, the number? I mean, is it a high number or low number? Again, the SAI is the index number. It's not a cost or anything like that. Yeah. And then lastly, I'm going to bundle that question. That, and also someone wants to know, can rising seniors already create an FSCID, or should they wait until 24-25 FAFSA issues get resolved? So rising seniors, I assume they're a junior this year, and next year they'll be a high school senior. But go ahead, Isaiah.
Sure, absolutely. So the SAI can go anywhere between $9,999 and a negative $1,500. So it because this is not the net price, as you heard me discuss a little bit earlier in the earlier slides. This is just the index number, as even Mr. Stennis even just said. You always want to factor in this. The range is negative 1,500 up to 99,999. Is not just an automatic zero as in years past. It goes even further than that. When it comes time for those individuals, rising seniors, those seniors that are just about to graduate, they can create an FSA ID at any time. It's just good practice to create one in their senior year. So in this case, as a rising senior, they should go out and create an FSA ID. When they're doing so, try to utilize an email address that they're actually going to check, and that they also store their password. Now, if in a case that they lose their password, if in a case that they forget, because if you're like me, where you have a number of different accounts and things like that, and you're trying to remember all of these passwords, it's always good to store it somewhere. But if you do forget it, you can retrieve it, because if you have access to your email, we can send an email to your email address, and you can go ahead and reset your password, or it might be easier to send you a text message to help you start that process on your mobile phone as well. So to answer your question, it's always good practice, especially for rising seniors, to go ahead and create their FSA ID. I would not wait until the 24, 25 FAFSA issues get fully resolved. I would do so now. I would do so now.
Very good advice. Yeah, we've definitely made strong, heavy strides towards resolving any issues. We're still working through a few, but yeah, as Isaiah mentioned, if you are a senior, you want to make sure that you indicate your cell phone number and or email, so that if there's any challenges with FSID, we can connect with you that way and forward any reset information. That's going to do it, Isaiah, I believe. A lot of thanks for the webinar. We thank you all for joining the webinar. Any last minute announcements or words you'd like to share before we close out, Isaiah?
If you haven't completed the 2024-25 FAFSA form, and you're expecting to enroll in classes beginning in July through June of next year, you should do so as soon as possible. Don't wait until it's too late.
Yeah. Now, I see one last quick question, Ken, I want to answer before we go, about once you accept the financial offer, are you required to enroll? The answer is no, you're not required to. Or does your offer just cancel? Yes, it does just cancel if you never enroll in that school. And do you accept the aid via the institution, student aid portal, or FAFSA website? You'll be connected with these institution. So once you've been awarded, because the award is going to come from, I know Isaiah mentioned, the institution, not federal student aid. So once you submit your FAFSA online and you've indicated what schools you want to go to, we will forward information onto those schools, and you need to follow up with those schools directly on the status of your offer letter or any questions you may have in that regard. With that said, Isaiah, we want to thank you for your great presentation tonight, and we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you and have a great evening, everybody.